العشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر. The first group are ayats of Surah Fajr, ayat 1, verse 1, number 1 to ayat number 5. We go to the meaning first and then we explain about the point. Wal Fajr, Allah is, again in this surah, starts with different qasam. Allah is swearing on different things. As usual, which we saw in Surah Inshiqaq and last few surahs, Allah has started the surah with qasam and with oaths. Wal Fajr, oaths and emphasize. Allah is saying Allah has made some oaths, and then on ayat 5 emphasize on oath by asking the question in ayat number 5. Wal Fajr, I swear by the dawn, daybreak. Fajr means, we know, or Fajr is the daybreak, is dawn. So Allah is saying, I swear, I ought to dawn, I swear by dawn. And walayal and ash, and the 10 nights. Layal and ash, layl is night, layal is the plural of layl, and ash is 10, and the 10 nights. By shaf wal watr, and by the even and the odd. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرِ, and by the night when it departs. So up to here, these are all qasams, because the first ayat started with wa, and we said wal fajr. When Allah starts the word with wa, it means I swear by wal fajr, wal layalin ash, wal shaf'i wal watr, wal layli idha yasr. And then ayat number 5, there is a question, هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر? Which we explain later. Okay, now, and we explained before that when we make qasam in our general conversation, for example, we make qasam to something to prove what we want to say, there is no relation between qasam we make and with the content of what we want to emphasize on. But when Allah is making qasam and odds to something, always there is relationship between the qasam Allah makes in different verses, which comes after each other, and there is a relation between the qasams and odds Allah makes by something with the content of the surah. Before we saw that in Surah Inshiqaq and other surah, Surah Tariq and all that, after qasam, because we said that when somebody makes qasam, makes odds to end something, the audience is waiting for the answer of qasam. Because we know that when somebody makes qasam, he wants to emphasize on something. So normally, when qasam comes in and when Allah makes odds or swears on something, by something, we wait for the subject he wants to emphasize on. Before we saw that after qasam, there was, for example, an ayat which the answer of qasam would come in. There is a difference between Surah Fajr and the surahs we learned before. After the qasams of Surah Fajr, we can't see an ayat and we can't see a verse which comes as the answer of these odds and qasams. So in one of the techniques of tadabbur is that when the ayats of answer, which is answer to surahs and to odds, when we don't have that kind of verse, it means that there is a relationship between the odds Allah has made and the whole content of the whole surah. So we don't have to, it's not a must to have the answer of qasam as an ayat just after this qasam, like Surah Fajr. So we should investigate what's the relation between these qasams Allah has made and the whole content of the surah. So we should see how these odds are related together and how they are related to the general content of the surah. If we go, the reason I told you that please study Surah Fajr, and it was very important, But when you study the whole meaning of Surah Fajr, you can understand that the whole contents of Surah Fajr is about blaming the interest and dependencies on this world. And so when Allah has made this qasam, the relation between these qasam, there should be a relation between this qasam and an example which is against dependencies on the world. And I explained at the start that when we say blaming the interest and dependencies on the world, on this world, we don't mean that Allah wants to say that we shouldn't be interested in this life of this world, so we shouldn't enjoy life. And no, you should notice on the word of dependencies. So having a good life in this world is not any blame on it. But if we are just dependent, we think that this world is the main intention for the life, that is that is not good about it. That is what Allah blaming it. So it's not that life we shouldn't have a good life or we shouldn't enjoy life. No, just I want you to notice dependence, blaming the dependencies on the world. So Allah is saying, I swear by the dawn, by daybreak, and the 10 nights, by the even and by the even and the odd, and I swear by the night when it departs. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرِ. Then Allah is saying, هَلْ فِي ذَلِكَ قَسَمٌ لِذِي حِجْرٍ on ayat in verse number 5. It means that is there sufficient proofs for men of understanding in those above us? It means, shouldn't the wise person wake up by the content of these odds? Shouldn't Allah be the center in his life? Shouldn't he avoid making this world as his main point in his life? So the general meaning is this. But when we go on this surah and we study the rest of the surah, then the meaning will be more clear. So we need to find an example which is so close to this qasam. As in Tadabbur, we said that we answer all the questions by Quran itself. And if we notice Quran and we study the whole Quran, we see what are those 10 days and 10 days and nights, which is so important in Quran, and which kind of examples we have in Quran about these 10 days and nights in Quran. Can any of ladies bring an example? For example, in other surahs of Quran, what are those 10 nights which we had which we have got verse about it in Quran? And
is it the 10 nights of the Zilhajj? The first 10 nights of the Zilhajj?
Yeah, exactly. The first 10 nights of Zilhajj, which we just passed. And I wish we had gone through this surah before starting Zilhajj, which could be really useful. So what is the specifications and difference between 10 days of Zilhajj and compared with other days? By these explanations, we want to say that these qasams Allah has made in ayat 1 to ayat 4 of Surah Fajr, wal-Fajr, wal-Layalin Ashr, wal-Shaf'i, wal-Watr, wal-Layli Idha Yasr. These are the best, the most clear example in Quran for these qasam or 10th night of Zilhajj. Here we say the 10th of the Zilhajj. Okay, what is the specification and difference between these 10 days of Zilhajj compared with other days? So that we can say these ayats are the example of 10 days of Zilhajj. If we notice in Quran the story about Prophet Hazrat Ibrahim, Prophet Abraham, alayhi salam, and the way he was commanded by Allah to sacrifice his son, Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam. It happened in these days. And the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, which was he was commanded by Allah to go to mountain for 30 days, and then Allah proceeded it for 10 nights to reveal Torah to him. It happened in these 10 nights. So you can see, and another specification of these 10 days of Dhul Hajj is the ceremony of Hajj, which the main spiritual goal of Hajj is ignoring this world. So we can see all these three events, which was about Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam and sacrificing land, which he was ordered, commanded by Allah to sacrifice for Hazrat Ismail, and the story of Prophet Musa was commanded by Allah to go to mountain for 30 days, which we have got it is advised to recite the 2 rakat namaz between Maghrib and Asha, when which we recite the ayat of Wa'adna Musa Talatina Layla, which Surah Araf, ayat number 142, which is about that he was commanded, Prophet Musa was commanded by Allah to go to mountain for 30 days, and he proceeded it for 10 days, and it became 40 nights generally. So both these and Hajj, both of them, these are related to those events which they are all about ignoring and neglecting this world. So we believe that they ignore the the material life. Even in Hajj, the main spiritual goal of Hajj is ignoring this world. For example, we ignore family, children, wealth, and we leave our countries and cities. We go to Hajj, and we pay full attention to Allah. And finally, Eid al-Zuha, Eid al-Qurban, finally sacrificing a sheep as a symbol of killing or beheading worldly desires. These are all about it. So these are all matched with the whole content of Surah Fajr, which we can see when we go through the two verses. We can see the whole content of Surah Fajr is avoiding dependencies on this world. That's the reason we say that these odds, wal-fajr, wal-layal, ash, wal-shafr, wal-wat, wal-layl, izar. Yes, these are all related to the best example, Quranic example for it is 10 days of the Hajj. Wal-fajr. Fajr is daybreak. And it is said that if we match these odds with 10 days of Dhul Hajj, we can say it has been started by the last day. So Fajr, which is daybreak, it's an example for Eid al-Zuha, Eid al-Qurban, which is high point of Hajj, which is the culmination of Hajj and the day of sacrifice. And then when it comes to Walayal and Ash, it's 10 nights of Dhul Hajj, which are great nights that lead to Eid al-Zuha, Eid al-Qurban. They end up to those great nights, 10 days of Dhul Hajj, which they end up to Fajr. They end up to Eid al-Zuha or Eid al-Qurban. What is Shaf? Again, if we match these with 10 days of Dhul Hajj, Shaf is the last even day, because Shaf means even. Even and odd, we have got in English. In Farsi, we say Zoj and Fat. So in English, we say even and odd. Shaf means even, the last even day before Eid al-Zuha, before Eid al-Qurban. The last even day before the Zuha is 8th of Dhul Hajj, which is called as Day of Tarwiyah. The day of Tarwiyah why it is called it is named as Tarbiya, because it was common that pilgrims and people who they would do Hajj, they would collect and store enough water for the day of Arafat, for Arafat and Mina, because they were supposed to go on Arafat and Mina for 4 days, and then there it was desert, and they couldn't find enough water to drink, so they would collect and store water. They would take with themselves. So it is named as Day of Tarbiyah. And what is Watr? Again, if we match these 10 nights with it, Watr means odd. It's the last odd day before Eid al-Zuha, before Eid al-Qurban. It means 9th of Dhul Hajj, which is day of Arafah. And Walayl Iza Yasr is the night passes. Walayl Iza Yasr, Yasr means the night passes and reaches what? Fajr, reaches the morning of the Eid al-Zuha, Eid al-Qurban, which is Fajr. So all these odds and these qasams are in terms of the specific events to ignore the world, the dependency on this world in 10 days of the Hajj, because those people who they go to Hajj, they forget and they ignore their family life and this worldly life, and they pay full attention to Allah in the period of Hajj. After these examples, Allah is saying in ayat in verse number 5, هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر? It means after all these qasams, making odds, and making qasams, which Allah has made on the events which they are related to, they are in terms of ignoring and neglecting this world, neglecting the dependencies in this world. After all this, a wise person is the person who, by the contents of these odds, realizes that the importance of staying away from the world, how important it is to stay away from dependencies on this world. That's why Allah is saying, هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر? It means, is there sufficient proofs for those men of understanding in those above odds? Is there insufficient proof for these wise persons? It means, shouldn't the wise person understand that the contents of these odds is related to neglecting this world? So the first group of ayats of Surah Fajr, ayat number 1 to number 5, was the guideline of this first group, is that swear and odds to buy or to the events of neglecting this world, in order to emphasize the guideline of the whole surah, because the contents and guidelines of the whole surah of Surah Fajr, the whole surah and content of the whole surah, is talking about neglecting this world, dependencies on this world. And guideline of first group is these swears and odds to the events of which are all about neglecting the dependencies on this world. Then ayat number 6 starts the second group of ayats starts. And Allah is saying, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi'ad? Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka? It means, didn't you see how your Rab? I explained before that I'm not going to translate the word of Rab, because in fact, in English translation, you can see Lord. Well, I don't want to use Lord because the word Rab has got its own meaning, and you can't bring, not in English, for example, yes, by Lord, it makes sense for those who want to just read the translation. But as I explained before, that Rab means the owner, and who has created us, and who guides us from the origin to destiny. In fact, it means Malik wa Sahib Ikhtiyar. So the owner, and who guides us from the origin point to the end point, which we explained before in other surahs we went through. If you notice, Allah is saying, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ إِرَمَ ذَاتِ الْعِمَادِ الَّتِي لَمْ يُخْلَقْ مِثْلُهَا فِي الْبِلَادِ. It means that didn't you see how your Rabb treated and dealt with the tribe of Ad? The Ad. End of ayat number 6. The Ad means with the tribe of Ad. Qawm Ad. How your Rabb treated with the tribe of Ad. إِرَمَ ذَاتِ الْعِمَادِ. The people who would live in the city of Iram. ذَاتِ الْعِمَادِ, which had very tall and lofty buildings. It meant a land which was so strong in terms of architectural structures, with tall and lofty buildings and beautiful columns. So the tribe of Ad, they would live in such kind of buildings, in such kind of cities with that high technology of architecture. التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد. In terms of beauty and strength, it was not created in cities like that. Before, there was no city like that. It was not created, the city like that, in terms of beauty and strength. Architectural, in terms of architectural structures, and those tall and lofty buildings. It means that they were so powerful and wealthy, which they had made that kind of city for themselves. And ayat 9, if you notice, وَثَمُودَ الَّذِينَ جَابُوا الصَّخْرَ بِالْوَادِ, we explained before that when one ayat starts with wav means and in English. So it means it is connected to previous ayats. So وَثَمُودَ الَّذِينَ جَابُوا الصَّخْرَ بِالْوَادِ is talking about the tribe of Thamud. And this, so ayat number 9 goes back to ayat number 6, which Allah said, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ. Didn't you see how your Rabb treated and dealt with the tribe of Ad? And now it is repeating. In Arabic we say wav al-atf. This wav, this and, connects ayat number 9 again to ayat number 6. It means it is look like that Allah has said, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِثَمُودٍ. It is repeating. So this phrase, this part of sentence, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ, it is repeating. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ. It was ayat number 6, which Allah explained that which kind of city they would live in, and how wealthy they were, how powerful they were, which they had built strong and tall buildings for themselves, which it was not created like that before. And then ayat number 9 again, Allah is saying, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bisamud. It means it look like that this phrase has been repeated. وَثَمُودَ الَّذِينَ جَابُوا الصَّخْرَ بِالْوَادِ. Means that didn't you see how your Rabb treated the tribe of Thamud, and ethnic group that had reached a certain level of power to enjoy the world, that they would cut out the rocks in the valley. You know, they were so powerful and wealthy, which they would cut the rocks in the valley to make their living place, and they would live there. This again, Allah wants to explain that how powerful and how wealthy they were, material wise, how powerful they were. And again in ayat number 10, فَفِرْعَوْنَ ذِي الْأَوْتَادِ. Again we have wav. It looks like that Allah has said, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِفِرْعَوْنَ. It means like that. So it means that, didn't you see how your Rab treated the Pharaoh? And Zil Autad means, if we want to translate it by word, it means that the owner of the nails. I've gone through different English translation, and I saw that they have explained different things. Even in Farsi, we have got two kind of explanation that one of the meaning is that because Pharaoh used to nail people who would not obey him, so they would call him Zal Autad. Because if I explain the word Autad, Autad is the plural of Watad. Watad means entering something in a place and firming it there, like nail. When you want to fix something, you use nail, for example, to fix a frame on the wall. So you put nail on and hit it into and guide it into the wall by hitting it, and you firm the frame by nail on the wall. Because Pharaoh used to nail people who they would not obey him. Even he did that to his wife Asiya. This is one of the translation which comes in Quran. But another explanation and understanding is that by the order of Pharaoh, very huge and strong buildings were built on the ground that looks like a mountain. This second meaning is more matched and consistent with the content of the verses, because you see that in ayat number 6, which Allah spoke about tribe of Ad, and then in ayat number 9, Allah spoke about the tribe of Samud. He explained that they were powerful material-wise, and they were wealthy because they had the technology to build strong buildings. So if we look at the consistent of the verses, and we can see that the second meaning for Zel Autad, which I explained, that it means that because Pharaoh would order to build very huge and strong buildings, and huge and strong buildings were built on the ground by the order of Pharaoh, and these buildings would look like mountains, because Allah that's the reason he's called as Fir'aun Zil Autad. If we look at Surah Naba, verse number 7, Allah is saying, Wal Jabala Autada. Jabal means mountains, and the mountains have been introduced as the nails of the earth. So because of this and the consistent of the verse of the consistent with the content of the verses, which was about tribe of Ad and Samud. In this on this ayah, in this verse, Fir'aun Zil Autad, we say that the second meaning is more. It looks more correct. Ayat number 11, الَّذِينَ تَقَوْا فِي الْبِلَادِ. This is why ayat number 10, we had wav, we had and, وَثَمُودَ الَّذِينَ وَفِرْعَوْنَ. So when we started from ayat number 6, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ, number 6, and then number 7 and 8 explained about tribe of Ad, and number 9 again we had وَثَمُودَ الَّذِينَ وَثَمُودَ and tribe of Samud. Ayat number 10 we had وَفِرْعَوْنَ and Pharaoh. But ayat number 11 we don't have any wav, so we can't say that this is connected to number 6, and it says that الَّذِينَ تَقَوْا فِي الْبِلَادِ. So this ayat is covering the whole ayat of number 6 to ayat number 10. It means that all these tribes, those who rebelled in the cities, الذين اتقوا في البلاد. It means that all these tribes of Ad, Samud, and Pharaoh, these all الذين means those who اتقوا في البلاد, who rebelled in the lands, disobeyed Allah in the cities. اتقوا is comes from طغيان. The rule it comes from طغيان, and in Farsi for when rivers there is flood in rivers, flooding of river water, we say طغيان. I don't know if you have got in Urdu or not the طغيان. But when water goes in the river in its limits and its special limits place and usual limits, it's normal, it is going and flowing. But for example, when there are lots of rain and the water exceeding the limits and borders of the river base, we say it is flood, and we say طغيان. That is why that this word has been used here. About people, it's like that as well. What Allah wants to say about these different tribes by these verses is that these people, tribe of Ad, people of Samud, and Pharaoh, because they had they were well off wealth-wise, and they had power of technologies and all this, they had used it against Allah's laws. What would they do? They would think that all these blessings they have, power and wealth, is because of themselves. So they would not. They would disobey Allah, like we have heard the story of Pharaoh with Prophet Musa alayhi salam. In how many verses we have got in Quran about it, and how the tribe of Ad and Samud, they were well off, and how Allah punished them with hard punishment. Why? Not because they were well off. Being well off, wealth-wise, and being powerful, having technologies, high technologies, these are not bad. These are not something that these are not against Sharia religious. Just because they were so dependent on these powers they had, and they would think that nobody can overcome them, this wealth and this power. So what would they do? الذين اتقوا في البلاد. It means they would exceed the laws of Allah. They would break the limits of laws of Allah. That's what طغيان means. As I explained, when water goes in its limits in the river base, there is no problem. We can use the water and it will be so beneficial, this river. But if it exceeds the limits of the river base, it destroys everything. For example, during flood, it destroys the cities, buildings, everything. But mankind is the same. When mankind exceeds the diving limits, the limits of Allah's laws, what happens? فَأَكْثَرُ فِيهَا الْفَسَادِ. What happens? They made much corruption in the cities. They made mischief in the cities. They did fasad in the cities. So when, like the river, when it exceeds and its limits, it can destroy whatever is on its way. Mankind is the same. When mankind exceeds the diving limits, the laws of Allah, it causes corruption in the world. And this corruption is the reason Allah says that there will be punishment for them. So it's not that because of the wealth and power and technology itself that Allah punishes them. No, it's because, in fact, that is good. As we say that now, for example, in Iran, we say that our supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is saying that we need to be powerful in every point of view, in science, technology, wealth. We should be powerful. In fact, men should be powerful. Believers should be powerful. What is not good about it? What was not good about these tribes? Which they used their power and material power and wealth against the law of Allah. They thought that these blessings is from themselves. They didn't notice that these blessings is all from Allah. So may Allah help us, that gives us tawfiq, that we shouldn't be one of these somebody like this kind of tribes that forbidden. So what verses number 6 to 14? What do these verses explain about? That the enemies of the Prophet rely on their wealth and material power, and they figure out secularism with two tools of power and wealth. And the Prophet and believers are under pressure and humiliation from the rebels of the world, because they have got power, and wealth, they exceed their limits, and they disobey Allah, and they oppress the believers. So they have used this, all their power and wealth to revolt and spread corruption. What happens to these kind of people who they did tughyan, and what happens to these people who are part of الذين تقوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد, who they disobeyed Allah, rebelled in the cities and disobeyed Allah, and made much corruption in the cities. They did fasad in land. What happens to them? Allah answers by ayat number 13. فَصَبَّ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّكَ صَوْتَ عَذَابٍ. So this is the answer of ayat 6. In ayat 6 we had أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ. Didn't you see how your Rabb treated these tribes who they did تَقَوْا فِي الْبِلَادِ فَأَكْثَرُوا فِيهَا الْفَسَادِ. كيف فعل? The question, how Rabb? كيف فعل ربك? How your Rabb treated them? How? Ayat number 13 is the answer. فَصَبَّ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّكَ صَوْتَ عَذَابٍ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَبِالْمِرْصَادِ. فَصَبَّ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّكَ صَوْتَ عَذَابٍ. So your Rabb poured on them scourge of punishment. Too much punishment. Which this punishment could happen anytime which Allah thinks it is right. So they have been, this azab has been written for them. This punishment is fixed for them, but it may not happen now, which we saw in Surah Buruj. It can happen anytime that Allah thinks it's right, or on the day of judgment. Inna rabbaka labil mirsad. Indeed, your Rabb is surely ever watchful. And we said that inna, when we have inna rabbaka labil mirsad. Inna is a word which emphasizes, and labil mirsad, la is again for emphasizing. We explained before that in Arabic. So Allah has made to emphasize on this verse. For example, it is said that surely, indeed, your Rabb is ever watchful. So which Allah is always watchful over the rebels, over the oppressors, has got two results. One result is it's a threat for rebels, for those who they do تقوا في البلاد and they do corruption. They فأكثروا فيها الفساد. Allah threats them. This ayat which we say, إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَبِالْمِرْصَادِ, indeed and surely your Rabb is ever watchful, always watching what rebels do, what oppressors do, and they shouldn't think that if they are, for example, they have got a safe life now, happy life, they are well off, wealth-wise, and they are powerful, they think that themselves that they are powerful. No, Allah is always Label Mersad, is always watching them. So in these ayats, it's a threat for these rebels, and it's an encouragement for religious leaders and believers who are under the pressure from the side of these oppressors. But the main guideline of these ayats is that Allah wants to say that the hard punishment is a destiny for them. Hard punishment is a destiny which Allah has decided for disobedience of Allah, for the rebellions. Allah warns rebels that Allah always monitors the tyrants and will punish them whenever is the right timing. So what's the guideline of this group of ayats? Ayat number 6 to 14 is that Allah wants to say the hard punishment is a destiny which has been planned by Allah for them, for the rebellions, for the disobedience of Allah. So if we notice that I told you to study the meaning of Surah Fajr, the first group 1 to 5 was Allah swear by Fajr, Layalin, Ashraf, Wal-Layl, Izafiyas, and then number 5 by a question. He said that these are sufficient proofs that Allah is paying attention to an event which is in terms of neglecting the dependencies on this world. And then from ayat 6, we see that the meaning changed in the way that Allah explains about the past tribes, about past people, and what happened to them. About those who they were well off, they were powerful, wealthy enough, but they disobeyed Allah, and what happened to them, like tribe of Ad, Samud, Pharaoh, and why it happened to them? Because they used their power and wealth against the limits of Allah. They exceeded the limits of Allah, and they made much corruption in the lands and in cities. That's why Allah put punishment over them, and Allah is always watching them. Now we come to ayat 15 and 16 of Surah Fajr, which are the main, which are very important and the main guidelines of Surah Fajr. Ayat number 15, فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِ. So, but the meaning, what's the meaning? فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانُ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ. So, but for mankind, mankind, when his Rabb, when his Lord, when his Rabb, mabtalahu means examines him. How he examines him? فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ. Treats him with honor and makes him lead an easy life. It means that when mankind, when Allah and his Rabb examines him, by giving him easy life when honors him and bless him with happiness, with easy life. فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ, when Allah mabtalahu examines him, examines mankind, his Rabb examines him, examines mankind. How? By treating him with honor, by easy life. فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنِ, then this mankind, this person says that my Rabb honored me. For example, Allah liked me, so gave me wealth, gave me easy life, gave me all the facilities with no problems, And then ayat 16, وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَهَانَنِ. وَأَمَّا, but إِذَا, when مَبْتَلَاهُ, again, when Allah tries him, examines him, مَبْتَلَاهُ. Mabtala is from the root of balava. Ibtala in Arabic, the root is balava. Balava means one of the meaning is examine, test. When Allah tries him, tests him, examines him, how? فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ, by restriction his facilities, by restriction his rizq. Rizq means all the blessings Allah gives to mankind. By strengthened circumstances, when he doesn't have easy life, there are problems, difficulties. Then what does the person says? فَيَقُولُ, he says, رَبِّي أَهَانَنِ, my Rabb disgraced me, insulted me. In fact, in these two ayat numbers 15 and 16, it is investigating the mankind's attitude towards the world. Why? Allah is investigating the mankind's attitude in the world to find the root of rebellion, the roots and the cause of disobedience, disobeying Allah. For example, to find the reason which caused disobedience of Allah, which person doesn't obey Allah. In fact, in these two ayat, Allah is expressing the human attitude in two states. One state is when he is well-off, wealthy. One state is when mankind or person is in hardship. And then by these two ayats, Allah monitors the wrong attitude, the wrong opinion, the wrong beliefs. What is the wrong attitude? What's the wrong view? Is that mankind, insan, person, doesn't consider that this word mabtalahu, these two ayat, mabtalah, when mankind doesn't consider that whatever happens in this life is examination. In fact, the whole life we are in this world, our life generally, and every second of our life is examination. We in fact, in this world, we are in an examination all the time. But when mankind neglects these tests and examinations, when Allah honors him by wealth, for example, when Allah bless him with easy life and different blessings, he says, oh, my Rabb, Allah honored me, liked me, so he gave all these blessings to me. And as soon as the problem comes in and person goes under pressure due to hardship, he says that, oh, Allah disgraced me, for example, he doesn't like me, that's why this happened to me. So why? What's the reason for this wrong view? Is that we don't notice, we don't consider that these are all examinations. For example, in Quran, about Prophet Solomon, Hazrat Solomon alayhi salam, that we have in Surah Naml, ayat 40. We have this that when he asked those people around him to bring the throne of Queen Saba for him, and one of the persons who he said that I can bring it in a second, which I can recite the ayat for you. قال الذي عنده علم من الكتاب أنا آتيك به قبل أن يرتد إليك طرفك. One who had the knowledge of the book said, I will bring it to you in the twinkling of an eye. طرفك. I can bring for example, the throne of Queen Saba in the twinkling of an eye. And he brought it. And when Prophet Solomon saw this, he said, هذا من قال هذا من فضل ربي ليبلوني أشكر أم أكفر. This is of the grace of my Lord, my Rabb, that he may try me whether I am grateful or ungrateful. ليبلون. So with all the power he had, Hazrat Solomon, Prophet Solomon, with all the power he had, that all the winds were in his control, all gens he had control over them. With all the wealth and power he had, he was noticing, he would believe that all these are min fazl Rabbi, because of my Rabb. It means that I'm nobody. And liyabluwan, all these facilities I have is from my Rabb to test me. So all they are my examination. And opposite of that, if you see Qarun in Quran again, in for example Surah Qasas, ayat 78, with all the wealth he had, he would think that it's all because of himself. And he was saying that قال إنما أوتيته على علم عندي. He was saying that, for example, he would believe that whatever wealth and power he had is because of himself. So when people, they would tell him that, notice that these are from your Rabb, take your share and spend it on the way of Allah, on the limits of Allah, on the way of Allah. He was saying, no, إنما أوتيته على علم عندي. It's because of my knowledge, that I have got this much power and this much wealth. Or for example, Hazrat Ayyub, with all the hardship came on him after all the blessings he had. But when all the hardship touched him, he said that وأيوب in Surah Anbiya, ayat 83, إذ نادى لربه أني مسني الضر وأنت أرحم الراحمين. That all this hardship touched me, came on my way, but you are Arhamur Rahimin, oh my Rabb, you are the most great, merciful, and you must Arhamur Rahim. Or for example, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, in all problems, all suffering he went through in Karbala, that he lost all his relatives, his sons, and how he suffered. He said that Ilahi rizan biqaza'ik. But what happens to us? As soon as something happens to us or we have a problem, we start complaining to Allah that, oh, why me? Why did it happen to me? What did I do that Allah treated me like this? Or for example, if we recite 2 rakat namaz, which is with notice and good, or we do something in the way of Allah, we expect Him to give us the whole world and with no problem. So all these are because of our wrong view. Because mankind doesn't notice that all the life is examination. We stop this session on this ayat because it takes time to explain the following ayats. Just I explained that Allah wants to say that in this surah, Surah Fajr, Allah is giving us two guidelines. One is Allah is investigating the reason for the view of we have for this view. For example, why mankind has got this view that when he gets blessing or easy life, he says, "Oh, Allah honored me," and if he goes through troubles and difficulties, he complains and he said that Allah disgraced me. The reason for this is that we don't notice, we forget, or we don't consider that all these are examinations. And then in following ayahs, Allah gives us solutions. How should we live, and what do we do to change this view, to correct and modify our wrong views? Because when mankind concentrates on this world and doesn't notice that this world is not the real life, then he thinks that the whole life is this world. So whatever happens, he compares it with this world. If Allah gives him a blessing, he is happy. If he loses for example, blessing, we can't say lose blessing. If he goes through a trouble, which that is even a blessing, but as an examination, and if we come out from the examination with good marks, it's a real blessing. It's a higher blessing. But because we ignore and we neglect, mankind neglects that this is examination, so his view is like ayats number 15 and 16. Okay, may Allah give all of us the knowledge of Quran, and we can practice it in our life. And inshallah, he gives us tawfiq that we will not be part of those people God forbidden with الذين تقوا في البلاد, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Sister, the one you sent today, like the notes about the grouping of the surah. So by looking at that surah, we can say that this surah has been divided into 4 groups.
Yeah.
This note you sent us about the grouping of the surah. By looking at it, we think that the Surah Fajr has been divided into 4 main groups.
4 groups. Right? Yes, that's right. Yeah. Then some of the groups, they have got subgroups.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, any question?
Can you tell us the meaning of ayat 13 again, because I missed that, sorry.
Yes.
Number 13.
فَصَبَّ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّكَ صَوْتَ عَذَابٍ means that Rab, the Lord, poured punishment over them. You know, the Azab means Sauta means Taziane, means the word in English is scourge, something like that. If I'm not mistaken, you know, when they hit somebody as the punishment, what is that? We say shalaq.
Lashes?
Yeah, lashes and
Yes. But we can't say word by word. It means that it means that lots of hard punishment. It was poured on them. Your Rab poured over their head lots of punishment. You can say that. The meaning is that. Why he did that? Because الَّذِينَ تَقَوْا فِي الْبِلَادِ فأكثروا فيها الفساد, because they used because they were so well off, wealthy and powerful, but they thought that this power and this wealth is from themselves, and so they disobeyed Allah and they exceeded the limits. So which we explained that when they exceed the limits, it's like the river. When it goes on its way, water goes in river base in its own limits, it is beneficial. But when it is flood and the water comes out, this exceeds the limits of the river base, it can destroy everything. It can make corruption. So what they did, taqaw, they did by wealth and power, they did corruption. Much corruption in the land and cities. That was the reason. فَسَبَّ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّكَ صَوْتَ عِذَابٍ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَبِالْمِرْصَادِ. Definitely, surely your Rabb, your Lord, is watching all the time. And we said that in ayat number 13 is the answer to the question of ayat 6. كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ. Didn't you see how your Rabb treated those tribes of Ad, of Samud, and how he treated Pharaoh? This is the way, ayat number 13 and 14. This is the way your Rabb treated them.
Okay, thank you, Jazakallah.
Any more questions?